Hello guys, Joe from Hello Sailor Effects here. Welcome to today's video and this short video series on how to build a Trainwreck Rocket amplifier. As you can see, I've made a little bit of progress here. This kit comes from Modeless Amplification. They're in the UK. They make fantastic amplifier kits. I've built, I think I've built a Marshall before and a couple of Tweed Deluxes and so on. They're great kits. Now Modeless supply you with everything, including transformers. This is the power transformer. It's whacking great transformer. This is also a Modeless choke. I did have an output transformer as well. I'll be using that on a separate build. That will be at Birmingham Guitar Show, hopefully in February, February. I think it's the beginning of March. If anyone's interested in that. Quick disclaimer, I'm clearly not civilian qualified to build amplifiers with a high DC voltage in, i.e. 300 volts DC, whatever. I am, however, qualified to work on 750 volts DC in a military situation in the Navy. So yes, I'm not qualified to talk about any of this stuff. However, I've had 21 years last Saturday, funnily enough, 21 years in the Navy as an engineer, working on this type of kit, albeit maybe a bit older with exception of this transformer, throughout my last 20 years. So I feel like I am qualified at least to offer a few pointers. That does not mean that I'm endorsing anyone building an amplifier and potentially hurting themselves. Please remember that even with an amplifier unplugged, there is still high DC voltage inside, stored by the filter caps. Anyone buying one of these kits can email Michael at Modeless. He's really helpful. He helped me out loads with different I have plenty of questions which I'm sure I'll talk about through the video on transformers and different specs. Anyway, he's really helpful, so I'm sure he will be happy to help should anyone have any questions with regarding their kit and safety. I did have a guy comment on Instagram and ask if I was doing a video like Uncle Doug on this on this amplifier build. Clearly I'm not going to do a video like Uncle Doug because Uncle Doug is a legend. I am, however, going to try and just explain my techniques and what I did to build this amplifier throughout this video. I will say, when I'm on techniques and my military history, a lot of the stuff I do is probably designed to get a ship through battle damage at sea, not designed for your amplifier to make it to a gig on stage. So there's probably going to be some differences. The guys that I really respect are people like Psionic Audio, or there's a guy, Brad, out in Australia, who make really great videos on amplifier repair and stuff, and they'll probably be absolutely cringing watching this video, some of the stuff I've done. But what I've done in this amplifier is good enough for a warship at sea, which means it's good enough for me. If this video series is something that you'd like to see, you think you might enjoy, please like and subscribe. It doesn't pay for the show. No, not, you know, nothing pays for the show because I haven't got a show. This is just me geeking out over some guitar gear. Cheers. Right, so first things first, we're going to have a look at fitting all of the components to this chassis. Now, the chassis that you receive will be aluminium coloured, same as underneath here. However, I've sprayed some Hammerite on mine just because I wanted to protect it, and also I made this faceplate being copper, as this is kind of an AC30 style amp. I thought this may be fitting. So I've made this copper faceplate, and I didn't want two dissimilar metals sitting next to each other and corroding away. So I used Hammerite, which does contain metal in the paint, so go figure, maybe that won't work. We shall see. Right, first things first, Modeless sends a load of bags of components and they're all neatly laid up for what is what. I'm going to go ahead and fit all the stuff to the chassis now, and then we'll talk about some of the differences that I'm going to implement on this build. So, first of all, I'm going to fit in one of the bags. You get all of the little grommets for these holes here, which are your where your transformer cables are going to go through. I don't know about anyone else who's ever built amplifiers. I mean, I'm not a professional, just like to say that, obviously. But these are a pain in the backside to fit in. Generally, they don't want to go in and they're stiff, and that's by design because obviously you don't want them to come out. So. Sticking with the top of the chassis, we're going to move on to our valve sockets, which are here. They come in a nice little bag. These are designed, these particular ones are designed to fit inside the chassis. You can get ones that fit outside the chassis, so when you lay them on the top, these wings will sit flush with the top. It doesn't really matter which type you use, I don't think. But yeah, this is the next step. Okay, so when we're orientating these sockets, it's always best to check out the Modeless's layout. This is the layout here. If anyone's after this, you can get it from their website. I've made some changes to it for what I'm going to be doing with this amplifier, but we'll talk about that as we go. Now, if we can just see these sockets here, they're labelled up with 9 pins. So, little pointer, 1 through to 9. This is the front of the amplifier, which is here, and this is the rear, obviously. So what we want is, we want the gap in the 9 pins to be facing towards the front corner of the amplifier. So it'll be facing towards this screw here, that way. So if we're looking at this here, we want them to be orientated that way round. That just means that when we're following this schematic, we can lay out the wires in exactly the same same fashion as Modeless has them set out, and that way you cannot be wrong, hopefully. Anyway, let's see. Oh, another thing is, you get these handy little bags with all the screws and lock nuts in, and it says valve sockets, so you can't go wrong. I'd just like to point out, I absolutely hate messing with these little fiddly nuts. People hate me using these. However, on board a warship, if you're in a snag and you need to get a job done quick, messing about with finding a right size spanner is not a thing. One of these in your pocket and you're golden. So people flame away in the comments. I'd love to hear all your hateful comments on it, but I'm going to crack on and use them. Right, so there's the preamp sockets fitted. It's preamp sockets and phase inverter socket fitted. Now time to go on to our rectifier socket. And same again, this is an 8-pin, so really this one doesn't have a right and a wrong way to fit it round. However, are the pins numbered on this one? The pins are numbered, so I don't know if you can see inside there that there is numbers on them pins. I want to orientate them so then number 1 is pointing towards the front panel and number 5 is pointing towards the back panel. So there's the back panel, here's the front panel. If I find number 1, which is here, I want that pointing towards the front panel, so it's going to go this way round, which then puts number 5 pointing towards the rear. No real reason, you could fit it anyway and then just fit the wires however you see fit to them pins. However, I just want to do it in accordance with this. Right, so there's our rectifier valve fitted. Now we're going to go on to fitting our output valves, so the EL84s. Here's our socket here, and as we can see, pins 1 and 9 with the gap in the middle is still pointing in the same direction as our preamp valves, so it's going to be nice and easy. We just follow where the preamp valves go. Here is a little caveat. Clearly fitted all these output valves wrong because I haven't fitted the little keepers on them to stop the valves from falling out. So same with this rectifier valve, they're all going to have to come out and start again. Let's go. Right, so that's how they fit in, and obviously your valve tube, if you American guys, go in there and this sits on the top and holds it in place. So I'm going to repeat that process for these 4, and then for this one here I'm going to add in the bear claw, so called, that holds the rectifier valve in place. Let's go. Here we are, bear claw fitted, and for our output tubes or valves fitted. Now for those of you who've been screaming at the screen all the way through this saying you forgot the preamp valves, yep, I know, and Modeless have nicely provided these preamp valve covers. They come with with tube covers, basically to shield the tube shields, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to fit them now. Right, there you have it. Hopefully me making that mistake will encourage you not to do the same. We have our preamp, phase inverter, rectifier valve and output valves all ready to go. Next, I'm going to look at the back of the chassis. So, if you look at the back of the chassis here, is our diagram. We have our IEC, maybe, power connection, mains fuse. Moving along, we have this hole here is actually for something else that's not part of the circuit. It's going to be blanked off for most builds, however I'm going to utilise it. And then we've got 3 outputs, usually for 4, 8 and 16 ohms. However, for my purposes I'm just going to have a 4 and 16 ohm, which will be these two, and I'm going to block off this one here towards the preamp side of the circuit. I'm just going to block that off. And this here, so on this circuit we have, I spin it down, we have our on-off switch, which allows power into the whole circuit. Then we also have this switch here, which it's labelled standby, but it's not really, because it's actually on the, it's before the rectifier valve. So this is a high and low. So we have a 260 volt tap and a 300 volt tap. So we can have 2 different voltage settings for this amplifier. Now, I believe Ken Fisher had 260 volts on his Trainwreck amplifiers. However, the Z-Rec was a collaboration with Ken and Dr. Z amps, and they added in this they call it the what do they call it, the sweet and not too sure. I think it's cushion or comfort. Comfort is the lower Ken Fisher setting, and another setting, whatever. I'm going to use this switch, however I'm going to mount it on the back wall here in this hole, neatly cut out, ready for me here, and I'm going to put an actual HT cutout, HT standby switch after the first filter cap, because if we look at Trainwreck amplifiers, so here we have a Trainwreck Rocket. I'm not sure, it does say who made this schematic here, I didn't make it up or I traced it. Our power comes in, goes to our first, our B plus comes in, goes to our first filter cap, which in this case here is 240 UF caps in parallel, which makes 80 UF. Optional resistors, which I'm not going to add, and then a standby switch, which I'm going to mount on the front panel, and then it goes to our choke. So I'm going to do it that way around. So instead of having the 2 switches as per this one, I'm going to have 2 switches on the front, on and standby, and I'm going to have the comfort and speed. That's it, comfort and speed switch is going to be mounted on the back panel, just like the Z-Rec amplifiers do. I did ask Michael at Modeless about this switch and why he chose that, and he said that when he traced out the circuit or come up with it, the Z-Rec had just been released, and he wanted to add that feature, so it's a real good thing to have. Let's start mounting. Oh, another thing while we're talking about switches. So these are the switches that come with Modeless. They're actually really good gold pin switches. I'm going to use these in my second amplifier build, which you will see shortly. They're fantastic switches. However, because I want to use an extra switch, and I already had these switches in stock, I'm going to use these ones. I mean, they've got a fancy bit on them, but basically I've got them because I've got enough to add in the extra switch. I advise that you just use the ones from Modeless. Right, let's get going. One thing to add, these ones come with like with little screws to go in them, because they screw together. I'm not going to use them as a screw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the screws out, put my cables or wires in, or clean up the faces, put my wires in, and I'm going to solder straight to this, straight to these terminals here. Your Modeless kit, if you choose to buy a Modeless kit, it will come with a faceplate that goes on the back. It will cover this. I'm not going to use it on this amplifier. I'm going to use it on the second build I'm doing. This one here is just going to have like dymo labels on, same as Ken Fisher used on his amps, just because I'm building this one for me. Now these switches come with the lock washer on the outside, and then an actual washer underneath it. The way to fit them, or the way I fit them, is to put the lock washer on the bottom, then it goes through, and then the washer on top, and then your nut. So your lock washer sits flush to the inside of the cabinet. Again, I can hear people screaming because I'm using an adjustable spanner, shifter, whatever you want to call it. However, on board a warship, trying to find the right size tool takes longer than doing an actual job. So if it's good enough for the warship, it's good enough for me. These components, you want to make sure they're tight, but you don't want to over tighten them. That's good enough for that. Now onto our IEC connector or power switch. Here we are. It's a plastic switch. Modelers have kindly put in a grounding wire, which I am going to use, and some shield heat shrink for heat shrinking all your connections. Ooh, definitely don't want to lose that, Joe. Well done. For heat shrinking your connections, I do have my own heat shrink, so I'll be using my own stuff, but it's good that it comes with that because some kits don't. One thing I will say that I've seen on a few amplifier builds before, if it comes with washers and lock nuts and so on and so forth, use them. A lot of people skip that step, and I don't understand why you would have the facility to use something like that and then just not use it. It seems a bit silly to me, but there you go. Find that a lot on board with the younger lads. They'll have parts left over from a job, thinking, we don't need to add this washer or this retainer or whatever, and then the thing falls apart when we're at sea and the ship's thrown around in rough weather or, God forbid, battle damage. Right, next we're going to go for the fuse. I'm actually not going to fit the fuse because I'm going to be soldering to this and I don't want the heat to go through the fuse. So I'm going to put that to one side. And here we go again, just a small rubber washer that goes on the inside. With these plastic fuse holders, one key thing is don't over tighten it. I've snapped them before now, being a bit zealous with it. Overzealous. Yeah. Right now our output valves, what am I talking about? Output jacks. These are switchcraft style. In fact, they are actually switchcraft jacks with a shortened thing across it. Great jacks. I'm going to go in these two here, right in the centre of the two output valves, and I'm going to block off this one here. And now to block up this hole, there was two options I thought of. One is in elaborate form of screw and washers and all sorts of stuff, and the other was to use a pin badge of Her Majesty the Queen, God bless her soul, and mount that in and then use some steel reinforced epoxy just to hold that in place. I haven't decided which one I'm going to go for, so right now I'm going to just fit the screw if I've got my elaborate mess of washers ready. But if that doesn't work out, I'm going to stick on the Queen later on. Actually, putting it in there and looking at it, I actually think I may be going with this. Let me know what you think in the comments, which way round you would choose. I mean, I know not many people get on with the royal family or that whole concept. However, being the fact that I'm still in the military, 21 years done, I'm a fan, and this amp is for me, so there we go. That's it. No, I'm not happy with that. I'm going to go with the Queen. We'll make a command decision on the spot here, and apologies to all of those people who don't like, who aren't loyalists. I am. I think for my American friends, I used to have a US Coast Guard guy who worked for me a few years ago. Josh, if you're watching this, love you, mate. He's actually one of my greatest friends now. But I don't think he quite understood the whole royal family, royalist thing. I mean, but by the end of his time serving in the Royal Navy from the Coast Guard, I think he did 2 years, something like that. Yeah, I think he got it. The Queen and the royal family, not so much the Queen now. If you think of them as a living embodiment of the flag. So for you guys, you have the American flag that you all rally round. But for us, the royal family is like a live, living version of a flag. And if you see them like that, then you kind of understand where we're going. So I think the actual Antecs out there are going to be going mental now because I've just super glued a metal fixing over the top of my chassis. It comes out inside. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to use steel reinforced epoxy just to hold that in place. I mean, it is literally just there to stop anything getting in or out or people sticking their fingers in. There's nothing here that is going to conduct or what have you. So I think that looks quite good. Next. Right, well, next, we've got a choice of either going for the front panel, which I think, because of the way I've made this front panel, it's going to fit into my cab, and the top of this is going to butt up against the cab, so it's taller than the amplifier, and I think that's going to get in the way while I'm fitting the transformers. So I think I'm going to leave that till a bit later on. Also, need to start thinking about adding the standoffs for our circuit board. So if we're looking at it this way round, like that, our circuit board's going to fit in this end. Now, for everyone building an amp out there, when you get your kit, it's probably advisable to get all the bits out and check and make sure you've got everything before you start building and what have you. And clearly, because I'm unwrapping stuff as I go, you can see I haven't. I've got to say this is particularly well made. Right, it's real thick phenolic material. I'm really happy with that. Anyway, let's see. So it fits over here somewhere, and I can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 connections for it, for the standoffs to go, and I can see the standoff connections there. So I'm going to go ahead and mount them, and I'm pretty sure if I click through it here, there we go, board mounts with lock washers, because we don't want this to fall out or come loose. Brilliant. Now what these are is, that's going to basically go through your cab, through your chassis. That's going to screw into it and hold it in the chassis, and then you can mount your circuit board or your turret board to the top of that. Brilliant. Now I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure where you want your different pieces to go, but I'm going to go bolt, washer, through, lock nut, then this, and then nut and wash it on the top maybe. Let's have a look. Looking at this, we see there's potentially another standoff there in the middle to stop any sagging of your turret board, which is good, so I'm going to fit that too. And now it looks like that one hasn't been reamed out to actually hold it in, so not too sure why that bolt is in that position. It's right under the power transformer, sorry, the output transformer. So I'm going to remove it. Now that may work with your with the transformer that comes with the modeless kit. I'm using something different, so I'm going to take that out. Looks like that may be a spare for just in case. Well, I don't know. Anyway, the rest of these are going to be used when we mount the actual circuit board to the top, or turret board, excuse me, used to working on pedals, turret board to the top of this. Okay, so in true Hello Sailor fashion, my camera ran out of battery, which meant that we've had to rejig and carry on working while the camera's been getting sorted out. So what you've missed, I've added in a grounding terminal here for the whole circuit and here for the power cable. Now this separate grounding for the mains in is a legal requirement. So if you're making an amplifier, you have to run the air fleed has to go to there, and has to have enough space that if this is pulled out, all the other cables will be disconnected before this one. Just a standard practice type of thing. And then down here we've got the air for our circuit. Because it's an aluminium chassis, can't really solder to the chassis too well, so the earth is bolted on in this corner here. Also, the power transformer, as you can see here, is now fitted. I'm trying not to creep these cables under here. I do say cables as opposed to wires, and that's a military thing, I think. Same as my wife goes mental because I call light bulbs lamps. She thinks they should be called light bulbs, whatever, doesn't matter. So this is our power transformer. As you can see, it's really stout, in the words of Uncle Doug. It's massive, really heavy, bit awkward to fit. When you're fitting this, one thing to remember is this inboard side of it towards the inside of the chassis has a lot more wires than the rest of them. So the large grommet goes there, which I messed up, and then the smaller grommets go to the other side. I don't know if you can see here. So we've got our mains and we've got our 6.3 volt heater tap. I come through here, they go in the smaller grommet to that side. Right, now, on the subject of transformers, I did say before, maybe, I don't know if that bit's made it into the video, but here we have my output transformer. It's from Gardner's Radio. It's made in the 60s, wound in the 60s. It's all vacuum dipped in varnish. This thing, Gardner's made transformers for Neve back in the day. I think Neve wound their own for their mixing desks, but the mic pre's and stuff, Gardner's did a few of them. So if it's good enough for Neve, it's good enough for me. It's old, adds a bit of nostalgia. The one from Modeless is a great transformer. It's really big. I am going to use it on my next build, but for this one here, for myself, I'm going to use this. Now, it is a little bit dangerous. It's an old transformer because the live terminals are at the top, and you can touch them while you're working on it or while you've got the chassis out. So that's one thing to note. Or I've had to re-drill, or I've had to drill some holes for this because obviously this chassis was drilled for the modeless output transformer. So for this one, we've got our centre tap and our primary windings. Now for the one that we're going to use, I think Ken Fisher used a 4.2 or 4.3, 3,400 or 3,300, something like that. No, 4,300, can't get my words out here, 4,300 ohm primary coil centre tapped. So I'm going to use the 4,000 centre tapped. But this does have 6,000 and 8,000. It's a 30 watt output transformer. And we have a 0 volt rail, and then we have a choice of 2.5, 5, 7.5, 15 and 30 ohm outputs. And the 7.5 and the 15 ohm outputs to me are 8 and 16 ohms. With output transformers and stuff, close is good enough, believe me, it doesn't make that much difference. I'll Skip from the Truth About Vintage Amps podcast. I give a quick shout out to Skip and Jason on that podcast. Absolutely invaluable information and entertainment. And if you're not interested in cooking, it's almost guaranteed to get you interested in cooking. Right, so anyway, I'm going to use these two taps here for my outputs, which are going to be the old 8 ohm and 16 ohm, couldn't get my words together there, and then my centre tap and primary. Now, if we look at it, the outputs are on the back of the chassis here, so I'm just going to orientate the output to be that side of the transformer for no other reason than it just makes sense. So we've got our M4 transformer bolts. Now there is M5 transformer bolts and M4 transformer bolts in this kit. You have 4 bolts for your power transformer, which are M5, they're bigger because it's a bigger transformer, and you get 6 M4 ones for your choke and for your output transformer. Now this, coincidentally enough, this is the modeless choke. It's 19 Henry, 100 milliamp. As you can see, I've hammer-rated the bells of this transformer and the main bit of this transformer, the body of it, just to match the chassis for no other reason than I like it. I have got a El Pico 25 Henry choke that I'm going to use on the next build, so there's something vintage in the next one as well, just because why not? Alright, let's go. Right, so there's our output transformer now fitted. I'm going to move on to our choke, and our choke's going to go through this grommet here. I don't know if you can see that. That's where our choke cable's going to go through. But before we do that, I'm just going to give them a little twist and put some heat shrink on them, just so then it, well, belts and braces really. You can of course just push these wires, cables, whatever you want to call them, straight through the chassis and into the, without heat shrink. It's not essential. Right, there we have. We've got our power transformer, output transformer and filter choke all attached to the chassis. The last thing to go is the front panel and all of our front controls. So I'm going to start with the pilot light, which is this assembly here. This is the same as what Fender used back in the day. Although I've gone for a purple jewel, and that matters. One thing I will say, there is absolutely no way to fit this and hold it tight ever. And if someone's made up a tool or something, or you amp techs out there that know how to tighten this, basically you're tightening this nut, but you've got to hold this chamfered edge here while you're tightening a nut, and it's impossible. There's no way to hold it. But if someone knows of a way to do that, that would be fantastic. Next I'm going to fit the input jack just to hold my faceplate in place while I attach everything else. Again, high quality switchcraft jacked with the little earth cut out switch thing. Anyway, here we go. This, I'm going to use my multi-tool again and try and get in there and tighten this nut while holding the front panel, which there really isn't space to do. I think maybe some sort of crow's foot, although this shield around the fitting doesn't help. Hang on, we'll leave it like that for now. Next is going to be our two switches. One's going to be a power switch, power switch, and one is going to be for the B plus cutout or standby switch. Let's take the screws out of them. And as I said before, these are screw terminals on the bottom, but I'm going to solder to them just to make them ready for soldering. I'm going to rough them up. Forgot to do that with this switch, which means I'm going to have to rough them up in situ, just a bit more difficult. So on this diagram here, you can see that our on-off switch is a dual, so then we can basically cut the neutral and the live together at the same time, and that's going to go closest to our light fitting. And then I've just got a single for our B plus, which is going to go next to that. Now we're on to our controls. Now, Modulus gives you the option of having standard pots or upgrading to CTS pots, of course. I upgraded to the CTS pots. They're just better quality than most of the others I find. I think he does have alpha pots as well. They're reasonably good. Ooh, almost. I also, you can choose which knobs you go for. I went with some brown cupcakes, which I think I'm actually not going to use now. I've got some chicken head style ones that look a bit more boxy, being as I'm going for the copper panel and all of that jazz. Anyway, so here we've got volume, treble, bass and cut. The volume is 500k, so if you look for our 500k pot, it's 1 meg, 250, 1 meg and 500k. These lock washers go on the outside because that's the only washer provided, and orientate the legs pointing upward. Like so, this is where to find out really that it doesn't fit. Oh, not too bad, we're good. I just noticed I'm going to have to clean off a load of fingerprints off this copper panel once the amp's complete. That's not a problem. One thing I say about pots is a lot of people over tighten them, and all it does is the pot doesn't get tighter, it just pulls on the shaft inside and rips them out. So please try not to do that, it'll save you some hassle. And then our treble and bass controls are both 1 meg, so let's make sure that we're using that like a pot there. Another 1 meg pot for this one. Always best to double check. I can't tell you how many pedals I've built where I get to the end and the thing won't bias or the sound's off, and it's because I put the pots in the wrong place and I haven't checked or marked the bottom of them or something, which is rather silly on my part. And last is a 250k pot for the cut. Now if you notice on this pot that lug is not actually used for anything, I'm going to snip that off now because it will save me later on connecting something to it by mistake. Right, now while we've got this open and we're looking at it, actually it's just reminded me of something. Here we've got a bias resistor, yeah, for the output valves. It's supposed to be bolted down. The chassis hasn't got holes for it to be bolted down. However, I've just put some electrical contact paste underneath it for now. It helps with heat transfer. I would have put it underneath anyway, and I'll drill them holes once I get home and I finish my duty. I'll get home, I'll drill them and bolt it down. No dramas there, easy fix, especially as the chassis is aluminium. Coincidentally enough, I believe it's Two-Rock, is it Two-Rock Eli or one of them from Two-Rock, that'll only use aluminium because they think that steel, which we normally use, interferes with the magnetic flux of the transformers, which in my opinion, is absolutely spot on, because it makes sense. Why wouldn't it? If you put something that's magnetic into a magnetic field, it affects it. So yeah, anyway, that is all of the fittings fitted now and ready to go. The next stage of this build will be to build the board up, and then maybe wire what's going on inside here that doesn't involve the board, and then we shall wire the board in and go from there. Hope you've enjoyed this part of the video. Please watch the next installment of my crazy train wreck build. Cheers.